Today, I'm very happy to welcome Anthony Turco of Ampturco Guitar Werks, makers of custom wiring harnesses and cables located in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania. Thanks for making time for us today, Anthony.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You know, the first time I went to your website, I was particularly drawn to your custom wiring harnesses, and I found it interesting that those two products both specifically state they are 50s style wiring harnesses. And I wanted to ask you what drew you to that style of wiring.
So that style of wiring is pertaining to the way the tone capacitor is situated within the circuit. The advantage to that is if you're playing the guitar and you roll your volume down to like clean up your signal at all, what the 50 style wiring does, where the way the tone capacitor is situated, it actually retains a lot of treble within the tone. Where if you did like what's called like modern wiring, where the tone capacitor is not in between the tone pot and the volume pot, it actually just resides on one terminal of the tone pot and then grounded to the tone pot.
Mhm.
That is a little more drastic, and as you roll your volume down to clean up the signal, it'll be a little dark, like darker sounding, something that doesn't retain as much treble. So that's why I really like the 50 style wiring. It works great for if we're rolling off the volume a little bit to clean up the signal. It also works really good too is the sweep on the tone pot to my ears becomes more gradual and useful through its whole sweep from zero all the way turned all the way up to 10, let's say. Um, when you if you go all the way to zero with the tone pot with the capacitor and 50 style wiring, you get a really cool, like almost like a cocktail sound. And to me, it's totally usable, especially if you're in a studio and recording and you wanted that kind of tone, you could totally pull it off. So that's why I really like the 50s wiring is you retain a little bit of treble when you roll the volume down, and you get a lot more tonal options when you're going with the tone pot from 0 to 10.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think a lot of guitar players might agree that the tone control is like, yeah, it's there. I start to roll it back, it gets a little darker, but after you roll it below about 8, it's kind of whatever. You don't really use the whole travel of the pot. And what you're mentioning is really helpful because I don't think most people really say, oh, sometimes I roll my tone back to 8, sometimes I roll back it to
Right.
3, really using the whole sweep of the tone pot.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So like I say about the modern wiring with the tone
Mhm.
capacitor in that situation, rolling the tone pot, it's almost like a shelf, like a quick shelf. You get to like you said about maybe 8, and then it's like, oh wow, that's like really really dark and kind of muddy sounding. You know what I mean? With
Yeah.
the 50s wiring, I feel like I said, the sweep is usable through the whole percentage of that sweep from 0 to 10. It works out perfect. A lot of times what I'll do is with my own guitars, I have them all with 50s wiring, and I'll keep that tone pot right around like 7, somewhere around there, and it just sweetens it up just right. And it's not, a modern wiring would probably be too dark. I probably wouldn't like it. You know what I mean? So that's why I think a lot of people just keep that tone pot on 10, don't even really pay attention to it much because I'd say maybe 90% of your if major production guitars nowadays are probably wired with modern wiring schematic, you know what I mean, with the tone capacitor.
Sure. Well, when you also a few minutes ago mentioned that with the 50s wiring, that as you clean up your volume a little bit, that it retains more of the high, would you say, in your opinion, that the 50s style wiring could possibly negate the need for a treble bleed modification?
So I wouldn't say it's as drastic as the treble bleed. That's for sure.
Okay.
Um, I actually have treble bleeds on two of my guitars, and they have 50s wiring as well. The
Okay.
treble bleed to me is absolutely fantastic. It's just when you roll that volume down, you got the treble bleed mod on there with the capacitor and the resistor.
Mhm.
It almost boosts the treble a little bit, and it gives you like a really awesome tone. I think, especially if you're using your volume knob a lot during playing and stuff like that. It's just really like sometimes I feel like a treble bleed should be on every guitar.
Yeah,
Really, to be honest.
I kind of feel sometimes like, how could you not have a treble bleed? Why would you not want one?
Yeah, yeah, but the 50s wiring I would say is not as drastic as the treble bleed. So I wouldn't say it's a replacement. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way.
And while we're on the topic of treble bleeds, I just really want to ask your opinion. I've heard that you could do treble bleeds where the I think it's the capacitor and resistor are wired in parallel, or you could
Right.
do it in series. What would be the difference in sound for a guitar player between those two kinds of treble bleeds?
To be honest with you, I don't know off the top of my head for
Okay.
those. I think there's three variants that they have for the treble bleeds.
Okay.
I forget the names of them off the top of my head. The one I use all the time is the the capacitor with the resistor in between both legs, and then it'll be on the common of the volume pot, and then on the other side, the left side of the terminal there.
Right.
That's the one I normally always use. So I apologize. I'll be honest. I don't know off the top of my head if that,
But the one
how
that
fair to change it.
yeah, but the one you use the most is the one in parallel, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And on your website for I believe it's for the SG wiring harness, you there's an image that shows the four pots and the values I believe are like 512K ohms, 509K ohms, 525K and 520K. And I really found that interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that before. So I wanted to ask you two questions. One, why you specify those exact values and how you actually find pots that are like 509K and 512K and so forth, as opposed to just all 500K.
Okay. So let's start out. The potentiometer is stamped for 500K. That's what's stamped on it for its spec.
Right.
No, I would say maybe almost no potentiometer is going to be exactly 500K. Never.
Sure.
So the potentiometer is usually like CTS potentiometers used by major production guitar companies and stuff like that are usually 20% tolerance plus or minus. Okay. So we take 20% of 500K in the minus direction. That could be a 400K potentiometer. So
Mm-hmm.
let me go into real quick how this makes a difference tonally.
Sure.
The higher the number of the potentiometer, the value, so 500K and up, the more your upper frequencies are actually going to make it to output. So it's going to sound a little brighter. This is why we tend to use 500K potentiometers with humbuckers, because that pickup is already naturally darker. And we tend to use 250K potentiometers with single coil pickups, such as, like, when I say single coil pickups, I mean like Telecaster style pickups, Stratocaster style pickups. P90s are single coils, but I put them in the 500K potentiometer range.
Okay.
That's just my opinion. It's all subjective. Obviously, anybody could go whatever you want. So that being said, those values that were listed on there, all that's really showing is that I measured the potentiometers and I hand selected where they're going to land in the circuit depending on what pickup is being used. So the neck pickup, we would use the higher value pots because the neck pickup is already naturally darker where its placement is. And now we're allowing more upper frequencies to pass through. And the bridge pickup, we do the exact opposite. But I would never use anything below spec. So if I'm building a wiring harness and the spec is 500K potentiometers, I'll never use a potentiometer that's 500K, even though it stamps 500K and say it's minus 20% in the minus direction. I would never use that.
Okay.
And the reason being is obviously because, like I said, the humbuckers, they want to see that 500K or slightly above. This way they can, all of their frequencies are making it to output, not being bled off to ground.
Okay.
So that's what those values mean. It's not, I didn't definitely like, okay, I got to find 509. You know what I mean?
I was picturing you on Amazon, like searching for 509K pots.
Yeah. No. So I hand measure when I get my bulk shipment of potentiometers. I hand measure them all. I mark what they are. My supplier, I use two suppliers. I used for a long time, Art of Tone. They're out of California. Fantastic supplier. He has CTS potentiometers built for him in the 5% tolerance range. So they actually come, they could be from 500 to like 550K. They'll be in that range, but they'll never be below 500. Another company I use is Vintage Inspired Pickups. I don't know if you've heard of them, VIP. They make potentiometers with the same thing, 550K, 280K instead of 250K. So nothing is ever below spec. I've started using the VIP pots more recently. The Art of Tone, he was having trouble getting, stuff in stock at certain times and everything like that. So I was, I had so many harness orders and stuff like that. I just had to find a new avenue. So I've been using the VIP pots and they're great. Now they're not CTS pots as far as I know. What they're doing is they're mimicking the CentraLab old pots from like the early days of the Gibson. They're supposed to be like a slight clone of that potentiometer. I don't know, who manufactures them for them. You know what I mean? It may very well be CTS and their name is just not on it. You know what I mean? But they're really, really fantastic. And they have a great taper for your volume and everything like that. It sounds really, really good. So yeah, those values are not. I wasn't like laser focused on getting those. It's just that I measure all the components and then hand select where they land in the circuit depending on what pickups being used in that moment.
But I think it's really helpful for potential customers to understand that yes,
Absolutely.
technically it's 500, it's stamped 500, but this is what I'm doing for you. I'm really selecting I've measured all of these, and I'm selecting the pots that make the most sense for their location in the circuit.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize that a wiring harness, the controls, your volume, tone controls, those components hold a lot of tone, like a major amount of tone within the guitar.
Yeah.
The values of those potentiometers can really sway that guitar one way or the other, bright, dark, muddy. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It really can. I have a lot of customers that'll come to me and be like, I want a wiring harness and this and that. And the first thing I'll ask them is, what's wrong with the guitar? And if they tell me it sounds fine, I just want new components, I'll talk them out of buying the wiring harness, because I can't promise you that these values are going to sound great. Your guitar may sound great to you, and
Right.
they may be below 500K potentiometers in there, but that may what sounds good to you. There's no, you know what I mean? So I always say, like, if the guitar sounds really dark, or you think it sounds really bright, or this or that, then we could get in there and sway some things, and maybe make it, more, satisfying for your ears.
Well, you make a good point. I feel like a lot of guitar players that go into a website like 920D or something like that, websites that do what you do, and they have these really fancy, a matrix of like 30 different pre-wired harnesses, which is
Yeah.
cool. But it looks cool. It's like looking at a bunch of muscle cars. But the question is, what problem are you trying to solve? Is there a problem? And if there's not a problem, you shouldn't buy anything. You should enjoy your guitar. But if there's a problem,
Yep.
exactly what it is, what you want. I want a brighter guitar. I want this. I want that. And then I think in your position, you would say, okay, I think I can help you solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's I had a customer once before with a Gibson custom shop ES335. And they're about probably the worst guitar to work on if you're installing the harness, you know what I
Because of
mean?
the F-holes.
Because it's all through the F holes.
Right.
Yes. So he was like, I saw your harnesses, and I build completely custom harnesses. I'll build one for any guitar. Now on the site, I only have listed the SG and the Les Paul, but
Okay.
I will build, and I've built Telecaster, Stratocaster harnesses, ES335 harnesses, Epiphone Sheraton. I've done basses, everything. I've done pretty much just about anything out.
Okay.
But I was saying to him, like, well, what's the problem with the guitar? And he was like, nothing. It sounds really good. And I was like, first of all, it's a Gibson custom shop. The moment you take a washer off of that, you just diminish the value of that guitar. You know what I mean? If you're going to sell that guitar and someone says, well, that's not original, that's already like this much off of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I actually talked them out of it. I didn't want to, chance like, okay, you're going to put this in and maybe you won't like it. I can't promise that it's going to be 100% better every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And that's the thing, is that somebody might not think of what you just said. They ask you to do it, you do it, and then they go to sell it, and it's like, yeah, they can put the original parts back, but it's not going to be quite the same. You could scratch the finish when you're.
Anything. Yeah.
Yeah. In the next video, we'll have part 2 of my interview with Anthony Turco. We'll learn all about the Ampturco guitar, speaker, and IEC cable product line.